The chair lays out House Bill 888 and recognizes Representative Slawson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman and members. I appreciate the opportunity to lay out
Representative, is your microphone on?
the lights on.
Okay.
Hello. No.
Tap on it. There it is. Okay, go ahead.
I appreciate a live mic and the opportunity to, I don't know if it is live, Chairman. Seems like no. Yeah, okay.
Y'all can hear it out there? Okay.
All right.
All right. Go ahead.
Thank you. House Bill H88 relating to the statute of limitations on certain healthcare liability claims involving gender modification drugs and procedures administered to or performed on minors. I appreciate that this is a particularly sensitive topic with passionate Texans on both sides of the issue, but all of us having what I believe to be an underlying and deeply held shared concern for how we best protect our children while they're minors and shepherd them safely into adulthood. We recognize as parents and lawmakers and healthcare providers that the development of our brains and bodies during adolescence is complex and a sometimes difficult, oftentimes even, process. Science and medicine tell us that the frontal lobes of children, areas responsible for executive function and things like impulse control, don't even finish developing until somewhere around maybe 25 years of age. Because of this, the law in several ways recognizes, respects, and protects the incapacity of a minor in voting ages, ages to purchase alcohol and tobacco, driving, ability to enter contracts, and even by extending the ages after majority when a minor can bring a claim in certain legal proceedings for harm suffered while they're still underage. Currently, under our healthcare liability claim statutes, some minors have an extra time period beyond the 2-year statute of limitation to bring claims. If they're under 12 when the cause of action accrues, they have until 14, and it's, I think, been this way since 2003. In the last 20 years, though, and particularly in the last several years, we're seeing increasing situations where children are being prescribed medications and having procedures performed to modify their gender while they're minors, only to later believe that they may have been harmed by lifelong consequences to their health, their sexual function, their fertility, their ability to have children by those drugs or procedures. And it's with all of this in mind that House Bill 888 will provide these minors an extension of the statute of limitation until they're 25 years old for a claim based in malpractice for providing a puberty-blocking drug or cross-sex hormone or performing surgery on a child when the purpose is gender transitioning or reassignment. I thank you for your time. I thank those in advance who have come here today to testify on this bill. I yield for questions and request a right to close.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Slawson. Vice Chair Johnson.
Thank you. I have quite a few questions. Normally, I'm all for expanding statutes of limitations. Typically not opposed to that in philosophy, except this seems very discriminatory and targeted to me. And I'm curious as to how many potential malpractice cases are you aware of that have not been allowed to proceed because of the current statute of limitations?
I don't have data on those that would have not been.
Yeah, because I would probably guess that there aren't any that have been dismissed or refused because the statute is what it is. And the other thing is, my question is, if we're going to address statutes of limitations and claims for minors and give them a broader stroke to address issues, why are we just limiting it to this? For example, let's just take Ritalin. Ritalin causes gynecomastia in boys. And it causes and there's with the rise of ADD, the rise of prescription of Ritalin, it causes young boys to develop breast tissue. And in fact, this actually happened to my son. And he had to have surgery on this issue because he took Ritalin when he was 8. But this didn't manifest until he was much older. So why would we not want to extend the statute of limitations for minors in that case?
Well, perhaps we would, Representative.
Okay. Then the next issue is, what about minors we have a case where a fertility doctor put his sperm in place of other cases and fathered like 300 children and way past statutes of limitations, and when it was discovered, why wouldn't we want to give them an opportunity to sue?
Are you speaking of the children who were born? Or
Yeah.
the patients who
Yeah.
were born?
Yeah.
And what is the current statute of limitations?
Well, it's the current statute of limitations in medical malpractice that you outlined. I mean, why?
For a
I mean,
child to bring a wrongful birth suit against a
yeah.
parent?
Well, yes, he used his own sperm as opposed to their natural father. Let's say if they were having fertility treatment. Let's say if you and your husband were having fertility treatment and they were supposed to use your husband's sperm, but they didn't. They used his own. And now he has like 300 children running around out there. And he's still licensed to practice, actually, which is unconscionable to me. But
What is the criminal statute of limitations in that instance?
I don't know criminal law. You know, I'm a civil lawyer. I don't know.
No, I understand.
But I'm just saying, there's all kinds of situations out there where we can argue the statute of limitations, and I just don't see. I mean, if you're concerned that you want to extend the statute of limitations for minors to the age of 25 across the board, I'm all for that. If you think that minors have unique situations of their development, we can sit here and come up with 8 million examples of how minors may take certain medications, whether they're gender affirming or not, where they can develop consequential damages or negative inferences down the road and would benefit from a 25-year statute of limitations. So I don't understand why we only care about the transgender kids and targeting them specifically. Why don't we open it up for anyone all minors to have their statute of limitations extended to 25? Is that something you'd be open to?
Well, I think I would consider it on a case-by-case basis as those bills are filed. I don't.
Well, we're talking about your bill and your statutes.
If you're speaking to an amendment, if what you're asking me is if I would amend this bill to include all children, no, I wouldn't be open to that.
Why?
Because this bill is very specifically crafted to address this particular situation where we see testimonies coming out from children who have reached adulthood who feel as though they suffered a harm when they were a minor. And it doesn't manifest, like you mentioned your son, until they were older. And they're without the ability to redress that within the country.
I understand that, but this is I'm not aware of any case out there where someone was prohibited from bringing a claim because of this. So this is a problem, a solution without a problem. And if we're concerned about children and medicines that provide them harm, where those harms may not manifest until down the road, it seems to me if we want to extend the statute of limitations to all children, but I don't understand why we have to discriminatorily just target a very small section of children and minors who could use access to the court system.
Well, I think that we have created a number of exceptions over the years when we have found instances where minors needed additional time to bring claims. We've done that for sexual assault of a child, aggravated sexual assault of a child, both in the CPRC and over in the Code of
But we're talking about medical malpractice. You're talking about the healthcare liability statute. Whether or not you have criminal liability on other issues, that's not the issue. We're talking about medical malpractice cases for medicines, pharmaceutical treatments, other medical practices where kids have suffered a damage as a result of medical negligence and the statute of limitations for that claim. And we're not aware of any case where this bill is trying to address a wrong that has happened, but there could be benefits to children in a lot of other circumstances that would benefit from a 25-year-old to extend the statute of limitations to minors to age 25. especially with a lot of side effects from medicines, especially in the ADHD realm. There's a lot of side effects that come from that don't manifest until later. And so, and this could be beneficial. I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that. The next question I have for you is, if you, how do you respond to the fact that multiple federal courts have found that this type of legislation is unconstitutional and that it unfairly targets or specifically targets the transgender community, and providing them enhanced statutory rights, and essentially would discriminate against children, based on sex in this case?
I'm not aware of a federal case directly on point to this statute, but would be happy to look at those if you would like to forward them to me.
I think I'll save some of my questions for other people that are going to testify. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Members' questions. Representative Vasut.
You think it'd be a curious thing that providing someone who has gone through gender transitioning with a claim for malpractice, giving them that right, that would be unconstitutional? What due process right can you possibly think of that would be violated by giving someone the right to a claim?
I'm not familiar with it, but I would be happy to look at cases to that point.
Say that again, Representative.
I'm not familiar with what the constitutional complaint would be, but to her question, if she has cases on it, I'd be happy to review those.
Comments were made to the effect that you're targeting transgender youth, but your bill gives transgender youth a claim for malpractice. Isn't a claim for a malpractice something that's been done to them that they believe violated the standard of care, and providing them a redress for that? Isn't that a benefit?
Correct.
Okay, I thought I was hearing something different.
Members, other questions? Okay, and Representative, you reserve your right to close.
Yes.
Great, okay. All right, we're going to open public testimony. The chair calls Michelle Evans. No, I think Michelle had to leave. Jonathan Covey. Anna Wynn. Ever Hayward. Is Mary Castle here? Mary Castle?
She's on her way.
Okay. Okay, Jonathan Covey. Michelle Evans, I know, is gone. Anna Wynn, Eva Hayward, and Callie Butcher. Do we still have the overflow room, or is it closed?
It should be so.
Okay. I'm gonna say names one more time just to give everyone time to possibly get over here from wherever they are in the building. Anna Wynn, Eva Hayward, and Callie Butcher. Jonathan, I've got you registered on behalf of Texas Values for House Bill 888. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you can start.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Jonathan Covey, Policy Director for Texas Values, testifying for the bill. This bill grants minor victims a right to sue healthcare providers who perform these procedures on them or provide them treatments for civil damages up until the victim's 25th birthday. I think the statute of limitations up until 25th birthday is appropriate. They talk about there's a honeymoon period between in gender transitions. It's said to be somewhere between 2 and 4 years, and this gives several more years after that for victims reach the age of majority to come to terms with what was done to them and to bring a cause of action if they desire. We appreciate this approach because it seems to really work towards providing real help and restitution to the victims, and I'd ask you to support this bill.
Members, questions for Mr. Covey? Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ash Hall. Stephanie Perdue. Sophia De Loreto Chudy. Okay. Ash, is that correct? I've got you registered on behalf of the ACLU of Texas and yourself against House Bill 888. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. My name's Ash Hall, here on behalf of myself, ACLU of Texas, against the bill. I'm sort of amused that we're talking about this as if it's going to be helpful to people who are receiving care around gender transition and gender dysphoria, because as far as any of us who have analyzed this bill, the only real purpose of it is to scare doctors into refusing to treat us. That's really the only possible reason that you would go ahead and say that it's okay to extend this particular
Go ahead. That doesn't
limitation, the statute of limitation for this, and literally nothing else. There's no other reason that would possibly exist to do that. I agree with the idea of actually extending that statute of limitations for everything. I think that makes a lot more sense. I think youth who receive any sort of treatment that ends up going wrong would deserve the right to pursue that later on if they so choose to. But only doing it for the transgender community is not meant to help us. Nobody is actually fooled by that. It is meant to keep doctors from treating us. And so the ACLU vehemently opposes this. We've noticed that there is, of course, no other sort of treatment out there for which there is this extension. It is literally only this. It flies in the face of Texas malpractice law. And so with that, I close on this. This is ridiculous.
Okay, Chairman Moody.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that. There's a number of, I know you've seen you multiple times in the hall this session. I think that's probably because there's a number of things that you're interested in engaging on. I know that obviously we're here on this bill right now, so I kind of want you to limit your comments to the bill that we have in front of us. But what the fact that this discussion is happening, talk to me about negative health outcomes. So the way that you posit the purpose of the bill is to essentially chill any doctor's maybe inclination to help folks that may be transitioning.
Correct.
So that if that's the goal of it, and that's the conversation that surrounds it, what are the negative health outcomes for transgender Texans opening this thing, having this conversation, and being here and kind of raising your community into a time like this in this way?
Right. So this bill is part of a broader strategy that's designed to target transgender people across the United States. And part of that strategy includes trying to make it as hard as possible for allies to support the community. And so this bill falls into that category. It's meant to target allies who would help us. Speaking on Texas specifically, the Trevor Project did a survey of LGBTQ Texas youth after the last session and found that 86% of them reported that recent politics had negatively impacted their well-being. So I think it's safe to assume that even just having this conversation, of course, would add to that. It is also worth noting in that same survey that 47% of the youth surveyed had seriously considered suicide in the past year, and 16% actually made an attempt.
Is that information that you provided to us, the Trevor Project data?
I have provided it in other hearings. I did not get a chance to print for today, but I can provide that to this committee shortly.
Those are numbers to always take into account. We're talking obviously about lives of folks. The other point I wanted to talk about, because I'm looking and you had mentioned in your testimony, gender dysphoria. So I see terms gender transitioning or gender reassignment. I don't see anything regarding a diagnosis of gender dysphoria or severe gender dysphoria. What would be the reason for not including the diagnosis in a bill like this?
I think the idea here is to trivialize the care that we have been receiving. Because gender dysphoria is something that actually shows up in the DSM. This is like an actual medical diagnosis. It is something that we are meant to take very seriously and something that has been treated and approved of by every major medical association. And so when you refuse to call it that and you make it sound like some sort of elective kind of treatment that people are seeking, it makes it easier for folks to justify trying to take that care away or trying to convince doctors to not provide that care, when we know gender dysphoria is quite serious and that receiving care for that lowers the risk of negative mental health outcomes that come on the basis of discrimination.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chairman Moody. Members' questions? Representative Slawson.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you for coming to testify today. So when you mention that you think that this trivializes the care that folks have been receiving, are you familiar with any stories of people who have reached their early 20s and maybe feel like there are side effects or things that they didn't anticipate that they're dissatisfied with as a result of any of the cross-sex hormones or puberty blockers?
In terms of folks who are actual members of my community, most of the doctors, any of the stories that I've heard, in fact, like doctors have been very clear about what expected side effects are, what the risks may be. And what I think actually stands out a lot is that we choose to go through this with this anyway, despite what the possible risks are, despite the side effects, because it is literally worth it to be your full embodied self and live with those risks rather than keep being somebody that you are not and keep suffering with gender dysphoria.
My question, though, is are you familiar with any who are dissatisfied with the way that's being lived out, whatever the risks were, that they are experiencing some negative side effect to that?
I don't personally know anybody. I am aware of the detransitioners that will sometimes come to testify, and my thoughts there are that that's unfortunate. I don't agree with these studies that have been manufactured that make it sound like the rate of regret is super high. It's actually quite low, which is fabulous. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the rate of regret for getting a knee surgery is higher than getting treatment for gender dysphoria. But what I would argue is that everybody deserves access to health care, whether you are having regret about gender dysphoria and the treatment for it or not.
Do you agree then that even if that rate is low, that this bill doesn't trivialize that, but actually gives those citizens an opportunity to have a redress for their situation?
Then why not call it gender dysphoria in your bill?
Because we are focused on the process and the procedure there.
Process and procedure for what?
For the administration, and with respect, this isn't questions back and forth, but for the administration of the medications and the performance of the procedure.
Which are used?
Without regard to the diagnosis.
You have to have a diagnosis for gender dysphoria to receive the treatments. So I think we are starting to perhaps talk in circles around each other. But I assure you, you can ask any accredited doctor in Texas and they'll be able to tell you more about that.
Thank you.
Representative Vasut.
You mentioned about that the doctors that you're aware of, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to remember what you said, that doctors that you're aware of, I think you said, go over in detail the potential side effects. Is that a fair summary? Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay. So, you know, a malpractice claim is premised on the notion that a doctor deviated from the standard of care. And let me give you a hypothetical. Let's say that there are side effects, and let's say your typical doctor lays out those side effects, like you mentioned. But maybe this other doctor does not. And a member of, somebody that goes through this procedure, they don't appreciate those side effects for them until they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. Shouldn't we give them the right to a claim because they were not provided with the information about side effects like others that you say good doctors do?
They already have the right to a claim. This bill just expands it, and solely for this. And I'm telling you, I believe the only reason we would do that for this particular type of treatment and nothing else is to discourage doctors from helping at all, including the good doctors who are happy to inform patients of the risks and help them get the treatment that they need.
Respectfully, under the current law, if you're 16 and you are in that position where a doctor tells you about the side effects and this particular doctor doesn't, they deviate from the standard of care, unless you bring that claim within 2 years, you don't have a claim. If 3 years, 4 years, 5 years goes by, this bill is removing the general.
That's not the statute.
That's not true, sir. I'm no med mal
Then I will
attorney.
I will allow somebody to clarify that for me, because the way I understand this bill is that it's providing a right to a claim up to the 25th birthday for somebody that has this procedure prior to their 18. Are you saying that as it exists right now, it's your understanding that if somebody was 16, had a procedure done, that they could sue all the way up till 25 if they didn't learn about the claim until later?
It wouldn't be up till 25, but the point is this is a standard statute of limitations across healthcare. Singling us out is the problem. If you want to extend the statute of limitations for something like this, you need to do it for all types of treatment, for all types of procedures, illnesses, whatever you want to call it.
But if those individual bills were brought up to extend the statute of limitations in those instances, they could and would get a fair hearing in front of this committee, just like any other bill. This isn't the only statute of limitations bill we will hear this session.
But there's a reason this particular bill is showing up now.
Well, look, you can question the motives of the author of the committee all you want, but if any member of this committee had filed a bill relating to extending statute of limitations for Ritalin or a knee surgery or any other procedure, they are fully able, have the right to do so, and I'm quite certain that if they requested a hearing, this committee would give them a hearing. The absence of extending statute of limitations in other instances should not compel us to oppose this extension of the statute of limitations by itself.
I don't think it makes sense to ignore the current political climate that we're in while we're talking about this, sir.
Well, this to me, I'm speaking for me, is not a political issue. This is a policy issue about protecting children. And no part of this here, I will not allow this hearing to be political.
I think it's too late, sir.
I don't think so. I think the members are asking you questions about policy.
By even having a hearing on this bill, it has become a political hearing, sir.
But this is a policy that the author believes and that other members of this committee believe, including me, protect children and give them a right, as Representative Vasut said earlier, until they're 25 to sue for malpractice. But if any legislative, Vice Chair Johnson, like I said, or anyone else had brought another bill relating to another procedure, we would hear it.
And yet, if I actually thought this bill was operating in good faith, I suspect I would have heard from any of you.
With all due respect, and we've testified in front of our committee before, and I respect you and every other witness who's here, but I will not let you impugn the motives of the author of this bill or any other member of this committee, period. I wouldn't allow that on this bill or any other bill. Let's talk about the policy itself. Let's not talk about the politics or the motives that you may believe exist. Let's talk about the policy. Representative Vasut, do you have follow-up questions?
I do not. Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Members, other questions? Chairman Moody.
And I don't want to speak for Ash. I think Ash does a good job of that. But I think the policy implication that was laid out very clearly, without getting into motivations or courage, is that the net effect of having this in policy is to limit access to health care for these Texans. That is the net effect. Motivation or not motivation. I mean, that's one thing. We can always divorce out what I think. We have this debate all the time on the floor. I don't know what's in your heart and your mind when you file something. I can never know that. but I can know what I think the bill will do in practice.
Right.
And I think what I hear is the bill in practice, while there may be a subset of folks that could avail themselves of a longer statute of limitations, the broader impact would be chilling essentially the any inclination a physician in our state would have to offer this care to Texans who need it, who have a diagnosis. So if we want to distill down, I think that's really what the core of it is.
Right.
And Chairman, to your point, we can set aside, it's hard sometimes in our world to try to set those things aside. But I think the concern you're raising is that this in law would cause that impact in the real world to real people. And maybe, let's put it like that. Maybe there are some folks that are going to avail themselves of that. And then you're weighing against what is the greater good? Is the greater good to give that extended statute of limitations to a small subset of folks that are I guess have regret about the treatment they received, or is it the vast majority that don't have regret about that treatment who are going to probably not have the access to that treatment because physicians are going to be afraid to get into this arena? And that's the decision we have before us. And let's weigh that. I know where I come down on it, and I appreciate you being here and helping us kind of zero in on that.
Members, other questions for this witness? Okay. Thank you, Ash. Sincerely, thank you for being here and for your testimony. The chair calls Stephanie Perdue. Stephanie, I have you here registered on behalf of Central Texas Pride Community Center, LGBT Rex, and yourself testifying against House Bill 888. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Leach and Vice Chairman Johnson. It's a pleasure to be here before you again. And Representative Slawson, I'm actually your constituent. I've been in your office multiple times this session already. I've been in most of your office this session. You may have seen me walking the halls as a giant dinosaur to draw this attention. So I'm a little bit crazy sometimes. I do apologize for that. I'm in opposition to this bill because, as Ash said, it is very clear to me that the result would be to limit care for transgender people. If a doctor's worried they're going to get sued because I'm going in there as a younger person getting care, then they're not going to want to take care of me. The longer you delay treatment for these people, the harder our lives get. I transitioned at 21 years old. I have never looked back. I have never been happier with my life. And I feel sorry for those who do have regret. I hope that they take the time to take responsibility for what they've chosen to do themselves. I think it's important. I am by no means a lawyer, but my plain reading of this bill also seems to exclude those who are intersex, who do have treatment given to them against their will. And if we're going to address people that have care taken, that have issues, those are the people we need to look after. That's just my opinion. That's all I have.
Okay, members, any questions for Stephanie? All right, thank you. Thanks to both of you for your testimony. The chair calls Brian Jackson, Alma Salcido, Connie Lingus, hold on. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's going to be on YouTube. Is Alma Salcido here? Okay. Brian, hold on. I need to stand at ease just for a sec. I have you registered on behalf of the Texas Alliance for Patient Access on the bill. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you're recognized to start your testimony.
My name is Brian Jackson. I am testifying on House Bill 888. I have been a medical malpractice attorney for 33 years. I also serve as general counsel for the Texas Alliance for Patient Access, also known as TAPA, a consortium of doctors, hospitals, medical clinics, nursing homes, and other groups working in healthcare. In 2003, our state faced a medical liability crisis. The legislature worked to strike a balance between a patient's right to file a lawsuit and the need for doctors and hospitals to have certainty with liability exposure. In response, the legislature made some hard choices and enacted tort reform as set out in Chapter 74 of the Civil Practice and Remedies Code. Those hard choices worked. The crisis subsided. The number of doctors in Texas has grown significantly. Access to care has increased due to tort reform. Our group is always concerned when any bill whittles away at those reforms. The statute of repose is important to physicians because it helps make tail insurance policies more affordable. If a physician moves to another community or moves to a different medical practice, they have to buy tail insurance to cover previous patient encounters. It was prohibitively expensive in 2003. Because of the statute of repose, in part, it is much more affordable now. Revising and lengthening the statute of repose could make tail insurance more expensive. We recognize that HB 888 is limited to a unique set of circumstances and will impact very few future cases. However, we are still concerned that this might be a first step in watering down an important facet of existing tort reform protections. That is why we are testifying on this bill, to make the committee aware of our concern that HB 888 could be a first step in lessening the successful tort reforms that have served our state well. Thank you.
All right. Brian, thank you for your testimony. Members, any questions? Yes. Representative Flores?
We were trying to read the statute, and I'm sorry if I missed this, if you may have said it, but I find it interesting that this seems to be going in the opposite direction of, medical malpractice cases, because normally it's to cap damages and it's to shorten, not shorten timeframes, but keep the timeframes that you can bring a lawsuit, to the 2 years or the 10-year statute of repose. And I'm not sure I understand all that completely, but so this goes contrary to all of that, doesn't it? Because it's extending the amount of time that you would be a target for a lawsuit, and would this seems to be going contrary to the will of this legislative body for the last, I don't know how many, 20, 30 years now?
Well, Representative Flores, the caps that are in place have been there since 2003. So they've been there for 20 years and have not changed. The statute of limitations has been there for 20 years. The statute of repose has been there for 20 years. So I don't get a sense that the legislature has made that more conservative or more detrimental to plaintiffs or anything of that nature, but there has not been a change either adding or subtracting to caps or adding or subtracting to limitations. So I think we've just had the status quo for 20 years.
So this bill would be inconsistent with that, maintaining that status quo over the last 20 years, would it not?
This bill would expand the statute of repose for an amount of time, and we have not had an expansion of that statute by the legislature since 2003. But I do think, with all transparency, in my humble opinion, as an attorney that does this, the Texas Supreme Court has ruled that the statute of limitations for medical malpractice cases does not expire till someone is 20 years old. And so the statute read 12 and 14, and the court said that violated the open courts provision, and they said no, a minor has the ability to file a lawsuit 2 years after they become an adult. So right now you can file a case until you're 20. However, the statute of repose has remained at 10 years. And the Supreme Court has not definitively said whether that 10-year statute of repose could impact a minor or not. There's only one case out there on it, and it involved parents that weren't diligent in following up, and so it doesn't set an overall precedent as to how that would work. But the statute of limitations, in my humble opinion, as it stands now, if someone filed a case for a minor, would be that the minor has until they're 20 years old to file the case. They could actually have 75 days beyond the expiration of their 20th birthday if they filed a notice of claim with an appropriate medical authorization before they were 20, they could get an extra 75 days to do that.
So, but for all medical procedures, et cetera, it's the same statute and statute of repose. And so
Correct.
singling out a particular treatment, is that unusual?
Well, I think that sometimes you do have various standards because of what we call the discovery rule in Texas. So, if you may have a different statute of limitations for a sponge case, because if you leave a sponge in someone, but you don't know it's there, you get 2 years until after you discover that sponge, versus if you knew about a bad knee surgery or something when it happened, you get 2 years from the surgery. So there are some different ways that limitations work based on the different procedures and the different injuries and the damages and that type of thing. But at the same time, this is unusual to have a statute of limitations for particular treatments be different than the general statute of limitations set out in Chapter 74.
Thank you.
Representative Asuq.
I appreciate you laying that out. It's helping me to navigate these two provisions here.
And that's my opinion on what that was.
Well, now,
I'm
but
not a judge.
I hear you. But in your opinion, based off of what you know, so if the minor is 14, and then as you understand it, it's 2 years beyond 18, so they could go up to 20.
Correct.
But the repose would cut them off at 24. Is that right?
Correct.
So under the bill that stands before us for the class of activities covered, they would get an extra year because it would now go to 25.
Well, they could actually get an extra 5 years because limitations is still going to run at 20. So this bill was going to give them to 25. So, if the statute of limitations expires, the repose doesn't matter.
Right.
So-
okay,
so-
that's
so-
okay. So we're okay. So
So you're actually
bill gives
giving
them an extra-
5 more years.
Okay.
In the scenario you spelled out, my humble opinion is you're giving 5 more years.
okay. I thank you for that. And I understand that's your opinion, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sophia De Loreto Chudy. Hi, Sophia. Good evening. I have you here testifying on behalf of yourself against House Bill 888.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I actually, I'm sorry, don't have a prepared testimony because I came here today for a very different reason, but I learned about this bill just about an hour ago. And to me, it was something that I had to speak on because as a just normal, plain citizen, I am not transgender myself. I don't have any transgender family members. Reading this bill in plain language, not as a legal expert, not as a medical expert, it is so very clear to me that this will have a chilling effect on medical care provided to specifically transgender individuals at a time right now when it is dangerous to limit access to medically necessary health care for young transgender individuals. And it's just really disheartening to see that this committee is spending time on an issue that very specifically only affects transgender individuals when they represent such a small portion of our population, when we have really big issues in this state. I'm a third grade teacher, and our schools lack adequate funding right now. We are suffering from so many different things in this state, and to be focusing on something that would very specifically harm transgender kids when they represent such a small portion of our population, as a Texan, it just really hurts my heart to see. And so I just came here to say that.
Okay, Sophia, Vice Chair Johnson.
Agreed. Well said. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you. Is there a Connie Lingus here? What about Anita Dickenme? Or Holden Middick? Okay. Are any three of those people here? All right. You got your moment. I hope you enjoy it. Does anyone else wish to testify on, for, or against House Bill 888?
I am registered, but I changed my mind in testifying.
You're not Connie Lingus?
I am not.
Okay,
Or any of the other names you mentioned.
that's fine. Come on up. Thank you. What is your name?
Andrea Segovia.
Segovia.
Segovia, S-E-G. I registered maybe like,
Yeah, there she is right at
okay,
the bottom.
I was like right before the bill.
All right, Andrea, thank you. Sorry about that. I've got you registered on behalf of yourself against House Bill 888. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thanks for your patience today. You can start your testimony.
One, thanks for the laugh. I don't think I've laughed all week. And two, I just want to reiterate what's been said, right? This wouldn't help trans kids or people. It would strip away care. And I'm saying this as somebody who has also talked to doctors who have been providing care, who are concerned about what their statutes of limitations, like we're saying, right, would look like, what their medical license would look like, as they've spent so much time in educating themselves in what care looks like. And I think also, as somebody who had 35 facial reconstructive surgeries in my lifetime before the age of 18, I understand what we're trying to avoid here, right? I had many doctors mess up the procedure and say, whoops, we can try again if we want. And that's not what's occurring here. And I just want to be very clear about that, that I've received so many calls of parents and families who are concerned that they're not going to be able to find a doctor for their kid because their doctors are worried about what the future holds for them as they're just trying to do their job. It's clear that this bill was written with harm and not help, because also, too, no one's really reached out to say, hey, how does this affect trans people before it was written? And again, right, I hope that the statute can get expanded for all, and one day, hopefully, that we'll see that in this committee, as the chair has mentioned. But again, that I just want to reiterate, credible health organizations support the care that is happening. I cannot reiterate that enough, that we have to let doctors be doctors and do their job and hold them accountable. I'm not saying to not hold them accountable, but this is clear discrimination against trans youth. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea, thank you. Vice Chair Johnson.
Andrea, I just want to take a moment to thank you and Emmett and everything that you guys do. You are the leading voices in the fight for transgender equality and LGBTQ plus equality. And as a member of your community, I just want to thank you for always shining the light on the pain that we cause in this building. And I am sorry that we're having to go through this week. I feel it with you, and I just want to thank you for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I've never gotten emotional in front of any committee, and I've been doing this work since 2017, but I really want y'all to understand how harmful the 140 plus bills against anti-LGBTQ people is happening in this state, and these kids and these people deserve so much more than what's occurring. People's lives are on the line, and I just need y'all to understand that, please. I've never pleaded before. I do policy work. And it's so important that you understand the power that you'll have over the control of kids' lives. And I'm happy to have that conversation, not emotional, in my professional self. But I just want to have the conversation and have open ears to what's occurring, what's really occurring. Thank you.
Representative Slawson, before you leave, Andrea, Representative Slawson.
Thank you so much for coming today. I just wanted to clarify real quick if you were testifying for yourself or if you were testifying for a group, because I heard Representative Johnson reference a group.
I'm testifying as myself, but I'm also the Senior Field and Policy Advisor at the Transgender Education Network of Texas.
Just
I didn't imply she was testifying.
okay, yeah. So it's just so the record is clear.
It's just myself.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Andrea, you're welcome here in front of our committee whenever you want. We're glad you've blessed us with your testimony, and though we might disagree on some issues, I promise that at least for our committee, and I know the bill author very well, that there's no part of this bill that is born out of any hate at all. We can disagree on policy and do so in a respectful way, and you've proven that tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to testify on for? Come on up. Did you register? Okay. You're going to have to go out to one of the kiosks.
It wouldn't let me. It said it was closed.
Okay. It's open back up. We'll wait for you. Take your time. If anyone else wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 888, please make your way to the kiosk now. Is it Soren?
Yeah.
Soren Aldaco. Sorry, I'm going to
It's
be
okay.
real careful on names going forward. Soren Aldaco, you're testifying on behalf of yourself. You're for House Bill 888.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead. Start your
So
testimony.
I actually testified on 1686 yesterday, and so I'm going to read you what I wrote for that because I think you guys need to hear it too. Hi, my name is Soren Aldaco, and I'll be testifying for HB 888 as someone who experiences gender dysphoria and who's found peace outside of medicalization. I believe that children deserve better than plastic surgery and hormones, but this legislature needs to prove to families that there is a path forward through expanded access and funding for mindfulness-based therapy programs. As contradictory as it sounds, I'm both trans and detransitioned. I began social transition at age 11, started testosterone and estrogen blockers at age 17, and by age 19, I had undergone a double mastectomy. Massive complications did not elude me, however, and I was gaslit, then ghosted by my medical providers after demonstrating weeks of concern. Emotionally vulnerable and with zero pain meds, I spent 8 hours in an ER bed alone before they cut my scars back open, sewed drains in, and aggressively expressed over 3 cups of blood from my raw chest cavity. This got me thinking, why do we uphold material solutions as the end-all be-all treatment for distress that's mostly mental? What could I do to conquer this beast while accepting that my greatest fear, my female body, was just as much a part of me? Less than 6 months later, I stopped hormone replacement therapy and began what I like to call a process of reclamation. Material solutions pushed me deeper into my ego, so I became determined to integrate with the world around me. I questioned my conceptualization of manhood and womanhood in the context of sexism and pain, and I learned how we develop our sense of identity through comparison to other people. So, in thinking of my 10-year-old sister and what kind of other I wanted to be for her, I realized that I needed to find an alternative way of addressing my gender dysphoria, one which didn't posit my body as wrong or my negative feelings as triumphant. I achieved part of this through self-compassion, which, according to research done by Kristen Neff, involves 3 key components. Mindfulness, or the practice of accepting negative thoughts and emotions like gender dysphoria for what they are. Common humanity, or the practice of recognizing that all humans are imperfect and prone to pain. And self-kindness, or the practice of extending grace to oneself always, especially when it's hard. Our handling of gender dysphoria is not an exception to this nation's mental health crisis. In fact, the gender-affirming care I experienced in adolescence was an elaborate placebo, and placebos work, but it allowed me to identify outside of a lifetime of neurodivergence, trauma, and gender nonconformity. I was no longer a loud, butch, autistic weird girl. I was a cool, happy-go-lucky lad. Kids need affirmation, that much is true, but how we affirm them matters, and if this bill is to move forward, we have to ensure that there are mechanisms in place to support self-expression, resilience, and healing. Not everyone who transitions experiences gender dysphoria, and not everyone who experiences gender dysphoria transitions. Just know that right now, best practice, is code for only practice, and accountability for a medical system that prioritizes ease and conformity over health is the first step towards developing care that actually systematically works. And by the way, I'm from Texas, born in Texas, and this is happening in Texas. I also couldn't sue because my statute of limitations ran out.
Soren, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Members, any questions? Representative Slawson.
I just want to tell you, thank you for coming in and testifying again. I know you were already here this week on a very long day,
16 hours.
and I appreciate you coming and sharing with me.
Yeah, no problem. I heard about this while I was sitting at home trying to make dinner, and I was like, this is a little bit more applicable because those providers, that provider that treated me and did my my double mastectomy, he came to Texas because of the laws here. He had 8 malpractice suits, and don't quote me on that, but like an absurd amount in California, and he knew that here he could get away with it, and he has.
Thank you.
Soren, I would like to, your testimony was wonderful, just like all the witnesses who were here to share their thoughts. We welcome that, but yours especially was impactful, and I'm sad and sorry that some of the other members weren't here to hear it. And so if you wouldn't mind, maybe at some point this week, writing some written testimony for us to submit, I will personally hand deliver it to the committee members who, for whatever reason, decided not to be here to hear your testimony, because I think that they need to hear it. Because according to right before your testimony, their position was that this never happens in Texas. It's never happened in Texas.
It happened in Austin. I'm from Fort Worth.
And your testimony proves that. And your testimony is exactly why we need this bill, period. Members, any other questions? Thank you for being here. Does anyone else wish to testify on, for, or against House Bill 888? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Representative Slawson to close on her bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I appreciate your time, and I close.
Thank you, Representative Slawson. Members, any questions? All right. With that, the chair will leave House Bill 888 pending at this time.